Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos, then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video, and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. So if we shift forward now to what year?
To 1983, August 1983.
So about 11 years later.
Yep, 11 years later. I was now a flight commander in 77 Squadron at Williamtown, and we had been tasked with not the first fleet support mission, but you might recall the carrier fleet was cancelled and the Hornet announcement was made at the same time. And the bosses in Canberra decided that the Mirage could easily replace the A4 in fleet support missions. And this was the first fleet support mission under those auspices, where we had to take 4 aircraft down to Nara, working with DDG Hobart and doing simulated strikes on the Hobart in pairs. We got airborne as a 4. We split into pairs when we were down there to add a bit of variety of direction of attack to the ship. And that's what we were doing. The weather was terrible. I had to borrow a Mirage from 20CU, which had the engine out, and they had to fit 374-gallon tanks to the aeroplane because in order to stay down there on station for as long as possible, we took as much fuel as possible. It was not a manoeuvring mission or anything like that. We just did gentle turns, heading towards the fleet, overflying the Hobart, and then turning back outbound. So we were down there.
Hobart was a guided missile destroyer.
Yes, the DDG Hobart, yeah. So we were working with her, and we've been down there on station probably 45 minutes, when my wingman and I were heading outbound from the ship, reached 30 nautical miles from the ship, at which stage we would turn around and through 180 degrees head towards the ship for the next so-called attack.
So what was the weather like and what time of day was it?
It was mid-afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and the weather was terrible. It was a sea state 5. It was pouring rain. The cloud base was about 700 feet, and we were flying below the cloud base. The visibility was not too bad. The rain was basically showers, but almost continuous showers. So your wingman would go out of focus a little bit when he was in the shower, and you come and turn around. Anyway, I gave him the lead. I said, in place left towards me, and told him to take the lead as I was turning in front of him back towards the Hobart. When we rolled out, I noticed I had dropped back, and I thought, I haven't done anything to drop back. It's a normal sort of 2G turn at 40 degrees bank, or a bit more than 40 degrees of bank. So I moved the throttle up automatically, and guess what? Nothing happened. So I looked down. The throttle was in the full position. I looked at the fuel, the RPM gauge, and it indicated what I knew from engineer tests: flight idle at 700 feet at sea level.
It was at flight idle?
It was at idle, yeah. For the engine, RPM was at idle, yeah.
Wow.
And I looked at my speed. It was 300 knots, rapidly going towards 250, 200. And I think I jettisoned the tanks. They were empty. straight away, declared a mayday, looked at the electric throttle, because I guessed that the throttle cable must have become disconnected from the fuel control unit.
What did the electric throttle do for a living?
You could modulate the engine power, but what happened when you used the electric throttle, the nozzles would stay wide open, so your maximum thrust on mill was significantly reduced. So
the nozzles down there on the back end with the arc and they just open and shut.
They would, at maximum power, they would close, not completely, of course. When you selected afterburner, they'd open wide up, and about 500, 700, 800 RPM below max, the nozzles would also be open. So they open to give you the maximum thrust at max, at mill power. So at this stage, the nozzles are obviously open. I can't tell, but I'm assuming they are because it's indicating flight idle and my throttle's not responding. So I'm assuming the throttle cable has become disconnected because I haven't had an oil failure indication, which would have been the other way of indicating that if you have an oil failure, the nozzles stop working because they were driven by hydraulic oil. Anyway, I looked at my wingman. He was about 1,000 feet out next to me. I prepared to eject as I watched the airspeed going through 250, 240, 230. And I said, theoretically, I'd recall 2,000 feet, 250 knots below that. But that was the lowest safe parameters to eject from. Well, I'm at 700 feet going rapidly towards 200 knots. I used the bottom handle this time. When I pulled that, I could see
what made you, thought process did it go quickly through your head? Did you bottom handle?
I made that a conscious decision after my first ejection that my next ejection I would use the bottom handle.
Okay.
So I was kind of it was glued into my brain that I was going to use the bottom handle, and I did. I put my left hand on the throttle, on the handle, my right hand over my left wrist, and pulled. As the seat travelled up, I could see 180, 170 knots as I got out. So the speed decreased incredibly fast. I was really surprised by that. The reason I didn't use the electric throttle, because from experience from engineer tests, it would take up to 20 seconds.
That's right.
For the throttle to engage.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't have that time.
Yeah.
So the ride on the seat was significantly more comfortable than the first time. The first time was one almighty bang and jolt. This one was a bang. The canopy went, of course, and then there was a bang. And I went up, but I could feel the rocket motor was just a gentle acceleration as we, after the initial bang, kept accelerating up the seat extension and separating. As soon as I was in the parachute, very quickly, at that speed, the shock was negligible. I don't recall a shock from the parachute opening. But I immediately looked down at the water, lowered my dinghy pack, rotated the buckle. I had pre-briefed that when the dinghy pack hits the water, I would punch the buckle and fall out of the parachute harness, which is exactly what happened. It all happened very, very quickly.
You had great presence of mind.
Yeah, well, I think, I had thought about it.
Yeah.
90 nautical miles out to sea. Sort of every once in a while, I would think about, this is how I'm going to eject, this is what I'm going to do. And I think most of us would have done exactly the same. It was rehearsed, ingrained process. I didn't have to think. I just did it, It just happened. And I fell out of the chute, landed in the water. The chute immediately took off with the 30-knot breeze that was there. And I'm sitting in what was effectively white water, white caps everywhere. and my dinghy's downwind from me already. So I pulled the dinghy towards me and
Was
got in.
did your LPU, your life preserver unit, inflate?
No, not at that stage. I hadn't pulled the troggles.
Okay.
I was happily swimming, fully clothed, again in a poplin flying suit, G-suit, and an LPU, nothing more. Which was, as you would probably know, in hindsight, was a terrible idea not to have an immersion suit. But anyway, there I was. I got in the dinghy, which, to my surprise, was black. The Mirage dinghy was a red dinghy with an inflatable floor and an inflatable cover. This thing was black, and I vaguely remembered this is a dinghy that we used to have in the Sabre. Turns out the parachutists would have trouble putting a Mirage dinghy into the dinghy pack. It was obviously bigger with all the extra inflatable layers. So they put a Sabre dinghy in the pack, which I was surprised on. Well, I sat in the dinghy, and for the whole time I was in the dinghy, I was more or less level with the ocean around me because I was just completely doused by the waves continuously. The waves were breaking over the top of me, the peaks of the waves and the wind. And of course, I'm pointing in a northeasterly direction. The sea anchor was working on the dinghy, and I'm looking northeast. The wind's from the southwest. I'm looking northeast, knowing that the ship, the DDG, if and when she arrives, will come from my left, 8 o'clock sort of direction. I got the radio out and spoke to my wingman, told him I was okay, apart from being wet. No injuries whatsoever that I was aware of. The Learjet from Nara was also in the area, and he orbited overhead. After about half an hour, they both disappeared. The Mirage had to go back to Williamtown before he ran out of fuel, and the Learjet disappeared because the exercise had been called off. The Hobart, as I know from hindsight, they marked with a grease pencil the position where I ejected, got the Latin long, and headed for that at full speed.
This was about 30 knots, wasn't it?
Yeah, 30 knots. And it was an impressive sight coming at me when finally it turned up a bit over an hour later after the ejection. I felt pissed off that I didn't have a red dinghy. If you can visualize this, a sea full of white caps. I've got a white helmet on. I've got green flying gear, which of course wet is completely black. My dinghy's black. And I was thinking, those blokes in the ship are not going to be able to see me. And they didn't. Yeah. They didn't see me. I directed the Hobart towards me. When I first picked it up, it was about 2,000 feet away. I called the Hobart and said, "Hey, I've got you. I'm in your left 11 o'clock, about 2,000 feet." They turned towards me. I said, "You're heading straight towards me. Turn right a little bit. I don't want you to run over the top of me." But we had quite a bit of fun directing the ship on me. And I said, the bows had beamed my position. They didn't see me.
Wow.
The mic was keyed open on the ship, on the bridge, and I could hear everything that was going on the bridge. And I had my thumb on the transmit button as well on my radio. And I was giving them constant instructions. I'm left 11, 50 feet behind the bow, almost to beam the bridge now. And I heard somebody yell, "Got it!" Meanwhile, I could see a diver was on the left-hand side of the ship with a ring on a rope and himself attached to a rope. He eventually jumped over, and I gradually drifted towards the ship. Everything was okay. I was happy I was going to be winched up. But the scariest thing at this stage was the Hobart was virtually stationary in the ocean and rolling like crazy. And I didn't realize how many pipes come out of the side of the ship. Great big sort of 6-8 inch diameter pipes, and they turn backwards. And those pipes, and I was right up against the hull of the ship, so these things were coming down past me. If it hit me on the head, it would have killed me, I reckon. So I kept pushing myself away from the hull, and then the diver pulled me away, got the ring around me, and then I was winched up the side of the ship onto the ship, got out of the ring, got rid of the harness. The diver was with me, and they took me straight inside the bowels of the ship into what was sick bay, I believe. The first thing that struck me when I got inside the ship was the stench of vomit. Obviously, the crew had a torrid time at 30 odd knots coming towards my position. I could smell vomit, in the air everywhere. I undressed, got rid of all my wet gear. They gave me a white overall that was dry and warm. Put that on, and that's what I had on for the next few hours. In fact, until the next day, more or less. They gave me a mug of cuppa soup, and I had a chat to the captain. Came down, said hello, and mind you, they started moving, and he told me that the helicopter from Nara was on its way to pick me up and take me back to Nara.
So is it getting dark at this stage, or what?
Yeah, it was getting dark. It was sort of twilight.
Were you cold?
It was when I sat on the bench in the sick bay. I had the mug of soup in my hand. The mug was shaking, and I looked down and I realised I was shaking all over. And I didn't stop shaking for 4 hours. I was obviously super cooled. 1.25 hours in the dinghy, and I had been cooled down significantly, and yet I didn't feel a thing.
Yeah.
I only noticed that I was shaking when the mug was shaking in my hand.
Did you feel any pain? Did you feel any pain as you warmed up?
No, it's not the same as freezing. I've experienced that skiing in Switzerland, where when you get cold, and thawing out from that sort of cold, that's different. Yeah, totally different. No,
so
it just took a long.
Did they have you wrapped up in blankets and stuff? Did they?
The sick bay was very warm. I didn't. I felt I could feel the warmth in the room, but my body was shaking, shivering, just uncontrollably. I couldn't stop it. Eventually, probably close to an hour in the sick bay, the helicopter arrived, a whirlwind, and up on the top deck I went. And of course, the ship has now slowed down again, and the ship's pitching and rolling in the State 5C. And I'm looking up, and there's bloody masts everywhere, and the ropes coming down to pick me up. I could see myself banging against one of the masts or being caught on the mast. Nothing happened, actually. I was winched up, got on the aeroplane, and back to Nara. I was lying in bed in the Nara hospital probably an hour and a bit later.
So still in overalls?
Just the white overalls, the Navy sort of sailor overalls. Yep. And yeah, that's all I had. I had nothing else. Everything else was gone. So I'm lying in bed in sick bay in the Nara hospital with people around me, the doctor and nursing sisters and so on. And eventually a camera turned up, wanted to take a picture of me, which Narelle was watching from home in Williamtown. And she got really pissed off that this nursing sister kissed me on the cheek. in a humorous sort of way, of course. But she didn't have much humor at that stage.
I'll bet.
Because the CEO had come to her at about 5:30. She was home with the kids, and knocked on the door, and Narelle said, "Okay, what's wrong?"
Wow.
And it was actually Alan Tithridge was the CEO.
Yeah.
He came in and said, "Come on, sit down." And behind him was a row of girls, wives
Wow.
of other pilots, and Narelle was so busy feeding them and filling them full of beer and wine, whatever, that and then she watched TV and saw me on TV. The next day, I flew back in a Mackie. 76 Squadron flew down a Mackie to pick me up, brought down a helmet and gear so I could get dressed in the green stuff again. And we went back to Williamtown, and I've still got a picture of having champagne on the tarmac at Williamtown when I got out of the aeroplane.
Well, did the doc get cranky again?
No. Well, the doctor at NARA saw me. He checked me over, and I said, "No, I have no pain. No pain anywhere, other than I was cold and probably tired and hungry. But apart from that, the main emotions were hungry and tired."
So when you came out of up the rails on each ejection, you managed to keep your body straight, to
Yes.
because a few other people I've spoken to had other things that happened, and they, or like the people that didn't have their body in the right posture, had said the biggest lesson they learnt was that get the right posture.
Yeah, I was aware of that, Pete.
I think everybody was, but you managed to do it.
Yeah, I managed. I mean, the top blind was designed for that. You sort of put your head back and pull the blind. And I looked down over my oxy mask and saw the speed and height, which I can't remember now, but it's mid 300, 450. But I had my head back. And the second one, I put my head forward, looked where the handle was, put my wrist around my left arm, and sat back and pulled.
Yeah.
And no, it was. I think the posture was pretty good. I didn't bring my legs back for any reason whatsoever at this time. First time I did that because I was afraid of the airplane rolling and I was going to hit my wingman. But actually, it turns out from the first and second ejection, both the guys watched me eject. They said, "You didn't go very high above the fin." I kind of thought I was going to go way high, but as soon as you come out of the airplane and the seat separates from the pipe, you kind of take on
your trajectory,
a flat trajectory, similar to the airplane.
Yeah.
You go into that trajectory very quickly.
Yeah. So I don't know what the odds are of one pilot having to have two ejection situations, which there was no doubt you needed to eject. That's the part two, that there was no doubt in your mind. The aircraft was indicating there was no other option, so you'd never had second thoughts about it. It was just you happy.
No. I reckon it would have been touch and go, even if I'd been higher and I could have used electric throttle. I had to use it. I actually had to use it at one stage during when I was at Ardew. I was 100 miles out of Edinburgh, from Williamtown to Edinburgh, and I got an oil failure, and I used the electric throttle. And I can tell you, when you lower the gear on finals, 5 miles straight in finals, I lowered the gear, the airspeed immediately decreased. I was doing 220 knots, and I was close to max power, max RPM, not max power, on the engine. I immediately raised the gear up and only lowered the gear at about half a mile on finals, knowing how quickly the speed was going to decrease. So that was one time I had an actual oil failure, and that was, again, the airplane had been at Williamtown for maintenance.
So that from my memory, that throttle failure was an optional ejection situation too.
Yes.
Wow. So that's interesting. Then you had your F-18 career, and hopefully you had a nice easy F-18 career instead of
having two engines was the best safety blanket I ever dreamt of. Yeah. I only had one engine problem in an F-18 when a panel came off, and I had a pulsing sensation as the panel went down the left engine at about 700 knots at
Wow.
5,000 feet. I think that was the reason the panel came off. It just ripped out of the side of the aeroplane. Anyway, I brought the aeroplane back on one engine, no problem. Landed. The panel definitely went through the engine. The back of the afterburner liners were all covered in silver from the panel, from the metal that went through all the blades, and all covered in silver. But the other engine worked beautifully. And I mean, that engine actually never stopped. It was on flight idle from the time that happened until I landed.
And then you went on to become quite a senior officer in the Air Force, and you managed to depart one day when you reached the day to leave the Air Force, and you departed damn near as healthy as you got in that sense,
Yeah, exactly.
despite those events.
And they didn't give me any more airplanes to fly. No, I did actually keep flying. I was lucky. I flew on test pilot's course. I flew the Harrier, but as air commander, I flew the Typhoon and the Mirage 2000, which I really enjoyed. Both those aeroplanes. They're quite different. Mirage 2000 felt like home, really, from the Mirage days. Yeah, it was. It had more thrust, but everything else, even the instruments, were almost exactly the same. The radar was, of course.
Who owned that?
It was the French Mirage.
Yeah, no, but was it in France that you did that, or?
Yeah, well, what happened was I was visiting various countries to look at command and control at air component level.
Yeah.
And I visited Germany, then France, and the French chief had been in Australia. He said, "Oh, you must come and fly the Rafale." And I thought, wow, fantastic. I'd love to do that. Between that was obviously when he was in Australia. He said, "You must come and fly the Rafale." He went back and the government announced that we were buying the F-35. Remember, the Rafale was potentially a replacement for the Mirage. And I got an immediate message from the French Chief of Air Force to me saying, "Sorry, the Rafale's out of question, but we'll give you a ride in a Mirage 2000. So they flew me from Paris down to Orange in the south of France. We went flying in a four-ship of Mirages over the middle of France, doing intercepts and a little bit of initial DACT. There was an Italian, a German, the French in my aeroplane, and an American in four Mirages. United Nations flying four French Mirages in France. It was awesome. And myself, of course. And I was sitting in the front seat, which was lovely. It's great.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Look, that was a very... I sat here on the edge of my seat again listening to you because, I can almost experience from my background just where you're at and how much is happening. So is there anything you want to wind up with before I say goodbye, John?
No, thanks for the interview, Pete. I enjoyed telling the story. There's, of course, a lot more to it, before and after. But I went on to fly, after the second ejection, the Hornet, and I enjoyed flying immensely until I basically stopped because I was in a ground job and only got the occasional ride if I was lucky. Fantastic career, very happy and very lucky to be alive.
Good job.
Thanks to Martin Baker.
Good job, mate. If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.